Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Gist, a new limited series powered by Energy Central, covering the big, bold, and impactful technological developments in geospatial information systems that are permanently altering the modern power grid. I'm Energy Central Community Manager and your host for this series, Matt Chester. Back in our first episode, I mentioned that we'd be covering a wide variety of ways GIS technology is changing the world around us. Perhaps none of those changes is as impactful as the shift to clean, renewable energy. At its core, GIS is bringing to bear a new paradigm for the clean energy transition. A transition that we all know is both, one, well underway, and two, deeply important to the future of our grid and our planet. GIS tech is special in its role in this transition. It can enable better site selection, optimize infrastructure planning, improve operational efficiency, and analyze solar radiation, wind patterns, and land availability. Essentially, GIS helps us to be better stewards of the resources we have, while planning more effectively for the future we know will involve clean, renewable sources delivered through a modern grid. Today, we're getting an inside look at that future. I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, Anthony Saylor. Anthony is GIS Manager for The Ray, a company that aims to transform the transportation infrastructure of the future by building net zero highways. They're utilizing solar-powered EV charging, right-of-way solar, climate modeling, a vehicle-to-everything data ecosystem, and more. Tons of cool tech powering the future, and much of it brought to life by GIS. Anthony worked at Southern Company Gas as a GIS specialist in the transmission sector for 6 years, and he also worked as a consultant for FEMA and for Georgia Power, where he led projects on overhead to underground construction maps. He founded and manages a GIS mentoring group called GIS Mentors of Atlanta, where he matches up teams of professionals and students in the Atlanta area. So Anthony, we're so excited to have you on the show, and welcome to The Gist.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt.
Of course, and let's just start with some basics. Tell me a little bit more about The Ray and how your work might be of interest to our listener base of utility and power professionals.
Yeah, of course. So, The Ray is basically using what you just talked about, using GIS in a way that we can create and bridge those gaps between where is the best location to put a solar array, for example. And the main thing that we work with is the right-of-way of highways and interstates. That is really what our analysis is towards. And what that analysis does is kind of give the DOT or any partner that we're working with to get them to shift their mindset a little bit from the right-of-way being more of a liability and more of an asset. And where on those on the right-of-way can we put these solar arrays and be confident that this is going to be the best location that we're going to be putting it on. We don't want to just put it in some random spot and, it's not being utilized or anything like that. And so that's where that GIS analysis comes into play. And it's really a great, tool to just convey that story, right? And I think the best thing that the Ray can do is bridge that gap between the partners that we work with, which is mainly DOTs, and then working with power utilities. And when they have our analysis and the different locations for the solar arrays, the power utilities company can be confident in knowing, okay, you've done your homework, you know what you're doing here. So yeah, it's just that's one of the key things that we really strive to go for, is building those partnerships and trying to bridge that gap between, where's the data with this? What's the best location? And are you guys confident in doing that? So yeah, I mean, it's just been really great.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I gave some of the career highlights of you, but can you give us, kind of go back to the beginning? How did you get involved in GIS? What interested you in the field in the first place?
I would say it started when I was a kid. Weather and climate was always something, or meteorology was always something that was very fascinating to me. It was a really bad storm that came through. I think I was about 8 years old, and I was freaking out. The storm was coming in. Glenn Burns, which is like, the Atlanta meteorologist, he's retired now, but I was like, what, I was freaking out. But then I told my parents, what does he do? And they're like, yeah, he's a meteorologist. And I'm like, I guess I'm kind of interested in that. But later on in my career, I did do an internship with a news station. It was a great time, but it made me realize when I started to get into my intro classes of geography, GIS was one of those classes that I took, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. I mean, there was another thing as a child as well, just scrolling around Google Earth or Google Maps where they had satellite view. I remember my brother showing me that, and I was like, can I go outside and wave to you guys? Little did I know, of course, it's just imagery, right? But it was, just dealing with maps and working with maps and then getting that data component in there, it's just really great. And then being able to tell a story based off of the data, it's just really great. I mean, it's something that I really enjoy, and it's really versatile too. GIS, I've been, as you mentioned as well, I mean, there's a lot of industries that I've dabbled in. Utilities being, the main one, of course, but there's so many avenues that you can go into with GIS, and that's what really made me appeal to it as well. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the background of my GIS adventure.
Excellent. Now let's, we mentioned in the introduction the convergence of GIS and the clean energy future. So I want to zero in on that a little bit, and specifically some of the solar projects you're working on. We know that location matters in a major way when it comes to identifying long-term clean energy solutions at scale, both for the Ray and for any company like yours. So can you talk to us about how GIS technology plays a part in finding those locations for sustainable solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the main things is GIS is just such a powerful tool to find those locations, right? Remote sensing is also another way for us to bridge that gap. DEMs, DSMs, they kind of give us the digital twin of what the Earth looks like in some way, data-wise, right? And so when we're able to connect those two and create some type of story of which locations are going to be the best, which ones are most suitable, which ones are less suitable, it really gets our partners excited to try to get, these solar arrays built and constructed, because the confidence that we give them when we backed our story with data is just really there. And yeah, I mean, it's just really, bridging that gap again with our partners and the power utilities companies. It's just really great. And yeah, I mean, they're, again, the confidence that we build for them is just always there. And it also helps with just building resilience as well with the power grid. When we're able to kind of show where these solar arrays are best locations to be placed, it helps with that grid that we're working with. I mean, I know data centers and AI is a huge thing right now. And one of the things that solar arrays kind of bridge is the time to construction to when the power, or when that switch goes on, right? Coal plants, natural gas plants, things like that take a lot of time to build. And so when we're able to kind of really, we have all the data ready to go, and being able to talk to our partners and try to get this construction done as fast as possible. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do. And the other thing is just, trying to get the demand for our power grid right now in the most short term, but also with alternate energy sources, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned some interesting tools there, remote sensing and all of that going into the siting locations. I'm curious about also GIS tools that are best suited to accomplish goals like predictive modeling and yield forecasting. What does that look like?
Yeah, so we don't really do a lot of like that predictive stuff right now. It's really just like as is, right? There's no, maybe like I know something that we're trying to develop is like glint and glare, because I know if we build a solar array around a airport, for example, the DOT is very concerned about if there's any glint or glare that happens with that. So that's one of those things where it's like a future thing, like what's going to happen here. But yeah, predictive things also, like I know cloud cover is a huge thing for solar arrays, or just like the climate in that region. We haven't integrated those yet into our equations, but we're definitely getting into different avenues, right? Like right now, it is working as is right now. But in the future, we do absolutely plan to get more variables into play.
Sure, yeah, definitely showing how it's a sector that's evolving, and that's I think what makes it so exciting. Now, what about the infrastructure side of things? Can you explain a little bit more about how GIS can optimize there, whether it's impacting efficiency in project planning, areas like regulatory boundaries, land use, climate patterns? What's the GIS opportunity there?
Right. Yeah. So again, you talked about the remote sensing side of it. I mean, that is really an important component. to the data and telling the story, right? So land cover, things like that, that definitely goes into play with our model that we have. We don't want to build in places that have retention ponds or staging areas along that right of way, right? We want to make sure that we're not destroying a lot of trees if we put, solar arrays down. It's kind of counterintuitive, right? So, we tried to take in a lot of factors when we create these locations. And infrastructure wise, again, I talked about those data centers and how important it is. There's a lot of demand right now for power. The supply is there, but we need more, and we need more of it being connected. And there's actually a tool that we use as well, which is a right-of-way transmission tool that uses the right-of-way and tries to find best routes along that right of way to put underground transmission lines. And so with that, there's a range of things as well that go into that tool, being the most cost effective or the least cost effective based on, again, land covers, soil levels, sediment type for the ground. Definitely don't want to drill into something that's granite rock or a boulder or something like that. You want to go through something that's very soft, right? And GIS and that remote sensing component of it bridges that gap and tells you what route is going to be best to do that. Again, I think that, the infrastructure wise, having the solar array portion of it, the right-of-way solar portion of it, and that transmission portion, the right-of-way transmission portion of it as well, takes those two components and makes our grid at least more resilient and more capable of reaching those demands that these companies that are data centers or AI companies are trying to get right now.
Yeah, and so you brought up right of way, which brings to mind the whole world of permitting. So I'd love to kind of dig into GIS's role there, and especially at this moment we're at, where reforming the permitting process for energy infrastructure kind of feels like one of the rare areas we're seeing bipartisan political support for. So on a technological side, is GIS making it easier or more constructive to work with regulatory bodies on permitting challenges?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, GIS tells that story, right, of what location is going to be best and what's going on around it. There's a lot of different pieces of data that you can bring into a map or anything that you're working with. And again, tell that story of, why this location is going to be the best location to build on. Also, I will say, working with the right of way takes the headache of trying to do this permit process of land grabs and things like that, right? Say, if you want to go from a power plant, right, and go in a straight line to where you need to go, there are so many different pieces of land that goes into play: farmland, neighborhoods, things like that. And you're having to deal with a lot of different people. And the right of way, basically, when we just focus on that, you're basically working with the biggest land owner of whatever state it is, which is the DOTs, right? Mm-hmm. So there's when the permitting process comes into play, or just regulatory boundaries and things like that, we have one partner. We have one person that we have to work with. So you definitely streamline that process of, having an idea and go into construction, which I think is just really great. And that's why I think, creating these partnerships between DOTs and the power utility companies is just going to be really, really beneficial for us and just the power grid in general. But yeah, so absolutely. I mean, again, the right-of-way portion of this is probably the most important because it really just streamlines that process of, construction.
Yeah. And what about the measuring or analyzing of environmental impacts? Does GIS serve a role in those kind of measurements that come up in the permitting process too?
I wouldn't say more of the permitting process, more of just the planning, I would say. And just, again, the confidence. I know that at once we find a location and we agree on a location with our partners, we are able to do a 3D analysis of those locations and then give them numbers, right? How many megawatts per hour per year are they able to produce? And it's all based off acreage and also how much it costs for electricity to be produced in that state, right? So we use those metrics to kind of calculate, again, how much the solar array is going to produce for them. Also, it tells them their carbon offset. I mean, there's a lot of different components that we can tell our partners if they were to build the solar array at that location.
Yeah, and in our introduction, we talked. I talked a lot about the marriage of GIS with the clean energy transition. I'd love if you could talk about how GIS can be used to optimize integrating renewable sources into the existing grid. What does that look like?
I mean, I think we've kind of touched based on a lot of that stuff, right? The transmission tool that we have, and using the right of way to connect the dot, right, of where a power plant is and where the need is, right? And then also those locations of where solar arrays are best suitable, right? I think eventually those two are going to come together, where the right of way is our main focus, right? So we have let's say we have underground transmission line that's built on the right of way, and then we can start to put solar arrays on top of those different locations of where the transmission lines are. So you're tapping into the grid and making it more resilient and more diverse. And yeah, I think that taking those components and using GIS to tell us where alternative energy can be built or produced is just going to be huge for our future.
Yeah. And I also mentioned, when I was introducing you, you had experience at Southern Company Gas, and, we might not always put together gas companies with the renewable energy integration, but I'm curious if, with your experience there, if you saw any ways that GIS technologies used in the gas transmission side can be adapted and applied to the electrical grid side that, again, moves towards that goal of optimizing renewable integration.
The big thing with natural gas is once the pipes are in the ground, it's kind of transmission wise, it's there. I mean, there are some old lines that are around. I mean, that's just not the company I worked for. This goes all around, right?
Yeah.
So I would say when it comes to like natural gas and trying to get our grid more resilient and things like that, it's kind of already set in stone, I would say, just because, it's way more, those pipes are huge that go into the ground. I know transmission lines are a little, it's just kind of conduit with the power lines going in it. So it's a lot more, it's a lot more versatile in terms of how dynamic it can be. But yeah, so I think that just GIS and with our environment and also with natural gas, yeah, all those things coming together to kind of make our grid more resilient is really important.
Absolutely. And now I just kind of want to steer our conversation with a look to the future. When you consider the future of renewable and clean energy, how do you see GIS or technology like it impacting the future moves and the future directions of utilities?
It's really going to be a huge component for us. GIS is just going to be the confidence booster in all of whoever wants to be interested in building something, right? That could go for anybody. It doesn't even have to be a power utilities company. It could be a company. Could be you yourself in your house. Maybe your decision on buying a house. I want to put solar panels on my roof, and which house is going to be the best one for that, right? GIS can tell that story. I mean, it can tell you if that, which houses are going to be the most suitable to put, a solar array on. But I mean, that's small scale, right? Big scale is, taking all of our components that we have now. I feel like there's just so much data that we have, and we kind of don't know what to do with it. and I think that's what's really important with GIS is it's going to take all those components of the data that we don't know what to do with. We're kind of just gathering it all, and it tells you the where of that, and it tells you the story of why, right? And I think that's huge and important for our future. And yeah, and I think sustainability wise and alternative energy wise, it can just go as long as we have the data. Sky is the limit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so it's interesting because we're talking a lot of the ways about how GIS will help the utilities and the energy industry evolve. But what about the other side? How do you see maybe GIS technology itself changing to meet the needs of the energy transition?
Yeah. So I think that's really interesting question. It's possibility that I know Esri is like the huge, GIS leader in our industry. It'd be really interesting to see if other companies start to utilize possibly their own GIS software. Like they come up with their own type of mapping solution because they see the power in it, right? I would be just very interested to see where the future of it goes. Esri is a great partner for us. Esri is a huge leader again. They are the pioneers, and but it would just be really great to see possibly other companies go into different avenues and possibly making their own software again, or their own mapping solution.
Yeah, and how do you think that if that were to come to be, how would that change the landscape of GIS? Is added competition something that could impact, let's say, the pace of innovation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, Esri, again, huge company, and they have a lot of smart people there, and they're always trying to revolutionize the mapping software, right? And if you have some competition, you always want some competition, right? I mean, it keeps us sharp, I mean, that's like the space race, right? That we used to have. And yeah, I mean, it keeps us, keeps us sharp, keeps us revolutionizing, what software is and things like that. So I think it's absolutely something that would be beneficial for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say the competition kind of brings out that innovation when coming from the energy side and at least the utility side where there's largely an inertia to new action because an IOU doesn't necessarily have competition to innovate. So
Right.
one of those challenges for the GIS actors like yourself might be getting those utilities to invest more and really adapt to these new opportunities. So what do you think it would take for large scale utilities to actually invest more in clean and sustainable energy that's powered by GIS technology and taking advantage of everything that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've touched on this point a lot. I mean, the power grid is just, I feel like it's kind of overloaded right now. I know our demand for power and the need to connect the dots of different locations is really high right now. Again, the construction of solar arrays is a lot shorter than a coal power plant or a natural gas plant or even a nuclear power plant. Again, all very diverse and all different in their own ways. But I think if we're able to give those locations of solar arrays and where they're best suitable, and then give power utility companies the confidence that these are the best locations, they're gonna yield the best output. They're gonna produce this amount of dollars. They're gonna offset their carbon emissions. I mean, it could be a cap and trade type of thing too, where regulations start to come back into play. That if they have solar arrays and they have a coal power plant, they're balancing out their emissions, right? So again, it's resilience. It's making their grid more diverse. It's adding more power to their grid as well. It's meeting that demand that they need. And I think that, again, GIS tells them that story and gives them that confidence that, there's data to back this up. There's actual numbers that we can get from this hypothetical story that we're going to tell. And I think it's huge and beneficial for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a key message. Okay, great. And I want to ask about one last area that's an important topic, and I know it's likely one close to your heart given your experience. You do a lot of tremendous work mentoring young people interested in GIS. So I wanted to ask about two things. One, what does that next generation of power professional think about GIS and its role in the energy transition? And then two, what excites you most about the future?
In my mentoring group, we have about 80 members right now, a little over 80 members. And again, it's a mix of professionals that have been in the industry for 5 or 10 years and then people just starting out. And something that is the most crucial when I ask, so basically I'm a matchmaker, right? When it comes to that, when it comes to my group, anybody that joins, I ask them, what are your interests in GIS? And maybe I can try to, match you up with somebody that are in those fields or you have similar interests, right? One of the biggest things that I hear all the time is sustainability. And it is such a huge component to what the future is kind of thinking about. They're really thinking about the environment. They're thinking about alternative energy sources, and they really want to go into those avenues. And it's something that I think the future of GIS and the future people that are going to come into GIS are really going to strive and push for. So I think there's there's going to be a lot of pressure. If we have a GIS department in your utilities, in a utilities company, to feel that pressure of being more sustainable. And I think, the more and more we get into the world of alternative energy sources, it's definitely going to be beneficial for us.
Terrific. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for joining the Gist. It's been great to learn more about your work, and we're incredibly grateful for your time.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No problem. And a reminder to our listeners, we've got plenty more episodes headed your way with super smart people who are literally building the future of energy. So don't miss a single episode of The Gist. Hit subscribe to this feed, share an episode with a friend or coworker, and head to Energy Central for even more insights on this technology that's moving the power industry forward. And we'll see you next week for more.